Hi, I'm Dennis Phillips, and welcome to Everyday Reloading and Shooting. There are links in the description below to two prior videos, one in which I was comparing a Varget and H4350 powders at various velocities. The charge weights were different, but the velocities were the same. And on the Varget powder, I discovered two areas at 33.6 grains and 35.5 grains where we had some really tight groupings. So I went back, and in the other video noted in the description below, I did this test where I went 0.2 to 0.4 of a grain below and above each of those charge weights and shot those again. And I came up with these best loads at 33.4, 33.6, 35.3, 35.5, and 35.9 grains. And those group very well. And so what I'm doing now is I'm taking these loads, these charge weights from this last test, and I'm going to load 75 rounds. I'm taking those best charge weights that I loaded previously, and I've loaded 25 each of 140 grain ELD match bullets, like you have here. Sierra Match King 140 grain boat tail hollow points, and 140 grain Barnes Match Burner boat tail hollow point. So I've loaded 25 of each of those, and this is the target that we'll be shooting. We'll have five-shot groups for each bullet, and we will compare both ways. We will compare to see which bullet grouped best on average, and we will also check to see which charge grouped best on average. The last time these were seeded, and we were using the Hornady ELD match bullet. So we're going to be seeding those again. So I'm going to start with that because I suspect that this seeding die is still correct. And 2.802, that's close enough. So we're going to go with that. This is the target I'll be using. I'll be shooting loads with 140 ELD match, 140 Sierra Match King, and 140 grain Barnes Match Burner bullets. I'll be shooting charges at 33.4, 33.6, 35.3, 35.5, and 35.9 for each of these. Here's everything already packaged up, numbered, and ready to go. Alright, in this video I'll be shooting my best loads that I've found with my Varget powder. You're welcome to enjoy the music while I fast forward through my shooting, or you can skip forward to the results at the end. All right, there we go, 75 rounds down range. Let's bring them in, take a look, and see how we did. All right, so this was my barrel worming group that I shot first to start off with. They seem to be shooting pretty good horizontally and vertically. So what I did is I adjusted the scope 2 clicks down. This is my point of aim, and to keep from messing up my point of aim, I adjusted the scope 2 clicks down so that they're shooting lower. Here we've got a really tight 4 out of 5 with a flyer. Fairly tight group here, kind of so-so. Got a really tight group here, that's probably 6/10 of an inch. That's probably just under an inch. My guess is this one's going to measure a 1/2 an inch. Probably 6/10 of an inch here, maybe an inch. Fairly spread out here, probably 1 1/4 inches. Really spread out here. Probably close to a 1/2 inch here. Kind of spread out here, but probably just over an inch. Just over an inch with 4 really tight right there. Kind of spread out here, that's probably 1 1/3 inches or 1.4, and probably again 1.4 inches here, I'm guessing. And here I accidentally shot the ELD, which was meant for this target. I accidentally shot it here. So this is actually a Sierra Match King. So it looks like the Sierra Match Kings did really well here, here, and here. And the Barnes shot really well here. And the ELD Match shot really well here and here. So we will take these home, measure them, and see how they compare. Okay, so here are my results from the range today, shooting 6.5 Creedmoor, testing 3 different bullets with Varget powder. We were testing Hornady's 140 ELD Match, Sierra Match King 140 grain, and 140 grain Barnes Match Burner bullets. We were shooting charge weights at 33.4, 33.6, 35.3, 35.5, and 35.9. So let's go by bullet. We'll start with the 140 ELD Match. We had an extreme at 33.4 grains. We had an extreme spread of 0.76 with a best 4 out of 5 at 0.40. Now here I got my targets messed up. This should have been 4 and 5, but instead I shot target number 4 here. So this was my ELD Match bullet for that second round, and I had an extreme spread of 0.81 and a best 4 out of 5 at 0.55 inches. At 35.3, we had an extreme spread of 0.61 and a best 4 out of 5 at 0.55. And then at 35.5, we were scattered. We were all over the place here. And this shot an extreme spread of 1.46 with the best 4 out of 5 at 1.22. So if you average these all the way down from the top to the bottom, we had an extreme spread of 0.94 and an average best 4 out of 5 at 0.66. Now when you take those two numbers and you average those together, that gives you a score of 0.80. That's averaging your extreme spread with your best 4 out of 5. Okay, then we had the 140 grain Sierra Match King, which was actually my best shooting bullet of the day. On our first load at 33.4 grains, we had an extreme spread of 0.55 and a best 4 out of 5 at 0.49. Then jumping back over here at 33.6 grains of powder, we had an extreme spread of 0.52 and a best 4 out of 5 at 0.39 inches. So very pleased with that group, just over a 1/2 an inch. Then at 35.3 grains, we had an extreme spread of 8.0 and a best 4 out of 5 at 0.75. Then at 35.5 grains, we had a really good group of 0.49 inches for the extreme spread, so just under a half an inch, with the best 4 out of 5 at 0.38 inches. Then at 35.9, not sure what happened here, but I had a couple of flyers, so that one grouped at 1.28 inches. That was not good at all, with the best 4 out of 5 at 103. So these averaged 0.73 extreme spread and 0.61 for the best 4 out of 5, and that gave us a score of 6.7. Then with the 140 grain Barnes match burner, our first group at 33.4 gave us an extreme spread of 0.76 with the best 4 out of 5 at 0.63. Then at 33.6 grains, we had, I believe, our best group of the day with an extreme spread of 0.43 inches and a best 4 out of 5 at 0.41. Then at 35.3, things started to spread out a little bit. The extreme spread was 1.08 inches and the best 4 out of 5 was 0.70. But we had a flyer right here. If you take that flyer out of the equation, then you got a 7.0 group, and then the best 4 out of 5 probably would have been a little bit tighter there. Then at 35.5 grains, we had an extreme spread of 0.97 with the best 4 out of 5 at 0.87. And then again at 35.9 grains, we were spread out again with a group of 1.26 extreme spread, 0.88 for the best 4 out of 5. And so the match burners averaged an extreme spread of 0.90 with the best 4 out of 5 at 0.70. So that gave us a score of 8.0. To recap, the ELD match gave us an extreme spread of 0.94 and a best 4 out of 5 at 0.66 with a score of 8.0. The Sierra Match Kings gave us an extreme spread average of 0.73 inches and the best 4 out of 5 at 0.61 and a score of 6.7. And then the Barnes Match Burners average an extreme spread of 0.90 inches with the best 4 out of 5 at 0.70 and a score of 0.80. Now, if you were to take this and this and this out of the equation, you would have a much better grouping. So now let's look at the charge weights, at how they grouped at the charge weights. At 33.4 grains, and I'll just say that we had an extreme spread of 7.6 and the best 4 out of 5 at 4.0. 0.55 and 0.49, 0.76 and 0.63. So our average for 33.4 grains was 0.69 extreme spread and 0.51 for the best 4 out of 5 with a score of 60. Dropping down to 33.6 grains, we had extreme spreads of 0.52 and 4 out of 5 at 3.9. 0.81 and 0.55, 0.43 and 0.41. That was our best of the day at 0.59 and 0.45 average with an average score of 52. At 35.3, we're at 61 and 55, 80 and 75, and 108 and 70. And at 35.3, that gave us an average extreme spread of 0.83 and a best 4 out of 5 at 0.67. And the score was 75. At 35.5 grains, we grouped at 146 and 122, 0.49 and 38, 0.97 and 87. What I don't understand here is how I can have a half-inch group with the Sierra Match King and a 146 group with the ELD match. So apparently, I think there's probably some shooter error in here, But then this group was at 0.97 and 0.87, so that's under an inch. That's not too bad. But then at 35.9 grains, and I actually thought this was going to be my best group because it was my best group on the prior target, we're at 107 and 60, 128 and 103, and 126 and 88. So 35.9 gave us our worst grouping at an extreme spread of 1.20 and 0.84 with a score of 102. There's one other thing to consider here too on this 35.9 grain charge. At this point, we've shot 65 bullets. This was 70 and this was 75. So the barrel was getting progressively dirtier. Not sure what happened here. I think we could probably blame shooter error there. I mean, out of 15 groups, it's going to happen. But I suspect this was probably a dirty barrel situation here. So to recap, I'll just give you the score. At 33.4 grains, we had a score of 60. At 33.6 grains, we had a score of 52. At 35.3 grains, we had a score of 75. At 35.5 grains, we had a score of 92. And at 35.9 grains, we had a score of 102. So the best bullet, the best performing bullet of the day was the 140 grain Sierra Match King, and the best performing load of the day was 33.6 grains of Varget at 0.59 extreme spread and 0.45 for the best 4 out of 5. One of the things I noticed is that early on when we were shooting, and as you see, these are shooting low, but they're on center, low, but on center, low and slightly to the right, but pretty much on center. Here with the Sierra Match King, we're still low and on center, but with the ELD, it starts to move to the right. With the Barnes Match Burner, it starts to move to the right. And then all of these groups, as you progress to the higher charge weights, begin to shoot to the right. At all of them, without exception. And so I believe that's because at that higher charge weight, that bullet wants to go straight, but the rifling has a twist to it, so it's causing that bullet to spin as it exits the barrel, and that's going to cause that barrel to torque and twist, so that's going to account for it shooting further to the right. All right, those are my results for the day. I really appreciate you taking time to watch. If you have any thoughts or comments, please be sure and share those below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.